and welcome to Hard Talk Extra. I'm Patrick O'Connell. My guest today made his name from those with too much to think about and too little to believe in. His book, Generation X, defined a global army of dispossessed, introverted 20-somethings, a decade on. And some 10 books later, his latest looks at loneliness, adoption, and redemption too. He comes from Canada, but he loves Japan. He hates TV interviews, but he's here for the next 30 minutes. Why does a man who helped define a generation refuse to speak on its behalf? And how did the humble quilt help change his life?
I want to know.
How's it going so far? Welcome, Douglas Coupland.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I'm just dreading the fact, because I know you've said that you sometimes feel physically sick during interviews.
Oh, no, quite the opposite. Oh, no, I'll say anything in front of a camera. Sometimes people ask the same question too much. You know what it's like? Yeah, go into your closet, and there's a shirt you really liked wearing at one point in your life.
Yes.
And you like the shirt, and you look at it, but you couldn't pay $1 million to get you to wear that shirt again. It's like just looking, it's like shirts you no longer wear.
Yes, and it's like things that you hear all the time.
Well, I'm okay with repetition. I don't know. It's just so strange, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, we are too. Let me ask you, with that in mind, you've written a new book, which you haven't been asked about before, called Eleanor Rigby, which I want to get to in just a moment.
Yep.
But you are, if you like a musician who's always asked to play your old stuff, because people keep bringing up Generation X.
Well, it's not like music. It's more like, I always think of, for example, I come from the art world, so it's Andy Warhol and his Campbell soup can. It's like a very convenient tag you can put on somebody. Because let's face it, Douglas Coupland's a very hard name to remember, but X, easy to remember. You know, I always think, you know you've really made it if you have a name like Sting or Cher or something.
It's just one name.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to work towards. Just Doug.
People have said that about the big fashion designers, Armani, Calvin. You know them by one name because they've branded their idea.
Well, I'd love to be one name.
Cope. But you mentioned that we shouldn't go over ground that you've explained to us, but you've said to one journalist who asked you, could you be a spokesman for Generation X, who are a dispossessed bunch of people who don't believe in anything, you said to the journalist, well, look, could you be a spokesman for your article? So you don't like speaking for the generation, but what does the fact that you wrote this book tell us about you and your friends who you thought would be the only ones to understand it?
If I go, we can edit out the ums for a sec. It's actually a good question.
We won't be editing out the ums. But Phil...
Okay, there's this, in a 1966 interview with Francois Truffaut, Alfred Hitchcock tells the story of two men on a train. Do you know this?
No.
And one man says to the other, what's that thing up in the rack up there? And the guy says, oh, well, that's a MacGuffin. Like, oh, well, what's a MacGuffin? And, well, it's an apparatus used for trapping lions in the Scottish Highlands. Well, there are no lions in the Scottish Highlands. So the other guy says, well, then that's not a MacGuffin. And I think Generation X is a MacGuffin. It's this thing in the baggage rack that it's either there or it's not there, depending on what you want to believe.
But I think a lot of people do believe it's there.
It's kind of shocking, actually. People go like, do you like it? Do you not like it? Well, it's not a matter of dislike or like. It's just, I don't believe it.
But it's tangible to people, because I believe in France they call it the Génération Bof, which means the whatever generation.
Oh, really?
It's another word for describing people who are a bit aimless, but are very clever.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm 42 now. It's a bit too late to be aimless for me. My brother was down in San Diego, and he was at this huge shopping mall, and there's a store called Gen X. It's like massive. He showed me a photograph of it, and he said, did you know anything about that? And I said, no. And sometimes things get so far away from the roots that it just snip and it goes off into outer space. I think X is one of those things that just went off into orbit. I have no idea what it's about anymore.
And you certainly never expected it to be what it was. But let's come forward, because I feel otherwise you might throttle me because you don't want to go back so much. But I'm thinking your new one, Eleanor Rigby.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It's about loneliness. One of your recent books, Girlfriend in a Coma, the title says it all. It's not a cheery little number, is it?
Well, I think of all the emotions we go through in a day, as like everyone on earth, loneliness is the number one emotion. We all go through it. We never ever discuss it. It's sort of this big eerie taboo in the culture. And the thing is, like, most people who get in a relationship and become unlonely, they immediately avoid anything that reminds them of that part of their life. But I think it's a very persistent, and we know the Eleanor Rigby, the song by the Beatles. I remember the first time I heard it. It's as fresh today as it was then. It's like, who is this woman? How did she end up so lonely? Like, what happened? And how does that happen to people?
But also the lyric from the Beatles as they sang it was, all the lonely people, where do they all come from? Where do you think they come from?
I think we all used to live in smaller towns, and we all used to live in situations where even if you were a freak or an outcast, you were still part of the family. And I think that's gone now. And it's like musical chairs, isn't it? And then some people just end up without a chair.
I mean, one thing that you've always looked at in your whole body of work is human connections. You're describing a disconnection, I think, to me there.